queen.
Kicking other people's asses for so long. I figure it's time we got ours kicked. What happened today is just the beginning. We're gonna lose this war.
If we're gonna be killed, then it's better to get it in the first few. I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm so tired. I think I've made a big mistake coming here.
We're going back into that NBA bunker complex tomorrow.
Duke's a lot smarter than you think.
I'm out there as the beast. He hungry tonight.
Shut up! Take the pain! You don't sleep on no fucking ambush.
Lieutenant! Why did you do something?
What are you talking about? No, you lie! I took it down, he said! Burn!
You know what I'm talking about.
No, I don't. You ain't a fighting squad, you piece of shit!
Sometimes I just look at a guy, and I know this fella's not gonna make it.
You wasted a lot of people out there with your fucked up fire mission!
Maybe I finally found it. Way down here in the mud. Maybe from down here I can start up again. Be something I can be proud of.
He's a human being, man!
Stars. There's no right or wrong in them. You're just there.
I don't know, brothers, but I'm hurting real bad inside.
Yeah? What you all know about that?
Everybody gotta die sometime.
All you got to do is make it out of here.
Hell is the impossibility of reason.
Okay, welcome to Movie Night Extravaganza. I am joined by my co-host for the night, Karthik, who has alien encounters on Substack and revolutionary tracks with the Left Flank Vets, who of course are our other guests, Marcus, Dick Warlock, and Erica. And Left Flank Vets are a leftist veteran propaganda cooperative against predatory military recruitment and war profiteering. How's everybody doing?
Good, man.
Doing all right. How are you?
Fantastic.
A little sad.
After watching Platoon?
Yeah. No one told me that it was not like Tropic Thunder.
I mean, it is like it is.
It's not. It is not.
It's extremely like Tropic Thunder.
I scream cried.
literally, the most iconic scene in the movie is repeated shot for shot at the beginning of Tropic Thunder.
Just doing the fucking machine gun dance. William.
Look.
Hey, no big deal though. I watched I too depressing of a movie. You know, make sure you keep your mental health in order. I watched Hot Shot Part 2 instead, so I'm just gonna refer to that. It's got Charlie Sheen in it anyway, so no big deal.
Easily confused.
Isn't that the one that has OJ in it as well?
It's
probably yeah.
So
no, you're thinking of Naked Gun.
Which is interestingly our next show on Thursday. We're talking about Naked Gun: Smell of Fear with Natalie Scher, which is going to be a hilarious show because she does like very serious writing in like all of these different outlets about like medical policy and COVID and all of that stuff.
Oh yeah, Natalie's dope. I love her. She's awesome. Tell her we said hey.
So having her talk about the Naked Gun is honestly a hilarious idea. But so one thing that I wanted to point out is that trailer kind of spoils like a lot of the best scenes in Platoon. Like literally, you see Elias doing the dance. You see Barnes standing over him with a knife. You see as that music plays. If I like kind of somewhat knew the movie but like hadn't seen it yet, I would be kind of pissed after seeing that trailer, I think.
Well, I mean, the image of Defoe on his knees screaming is kind of like the iconic image of Platoon, right? Of him just like doing the Christ on a cross for you. Why, God?
Yeah, and they used it for promotion, which like once again, that's kind of like the scene in the movie that really jars you to the point where I think both that and of course like Barnes shooting him a bunch of times kind of jars you into like the state of mind where like fragging and friendly fire, like death by friendly fire are incredibly common things that happen throughout the Vietnam War, and it's kind of spoiling it. Like, by the way, Defoe's character, I don't gets it. He gets shot a bunch, so that
spoiler alert. Yeah, well, it's weird because the movie also the movie is all about the movie has shitty politics, like in terms of what in my opinion, of Oliver Stone's politics about the war. But like the interesting thing about the movie is that its only real politics are the politics internally to the platoon, like of the Barnes faction versus the Elias faction, the like two most prominent squad leaders, and then the fragging that takes place between them. But like the most common fragging in Vietnam was when you smoked that fucking the douchebag LT who was like in his Ohio State t-shirt being, hello man, how are you? Duck Phillips from Mad Men.
Yeah. I was for a little bit when I was first watching it, I was like, where the fuck do I know this guy from and why don't I like him? And I'm like, no, it's Duck. Yeah, it's Duck Phillips.
I thought it was Oklahoma State.
Oh shit, was it? Sorry. Maybe I was just thinking about fragging you, Marcus. I'm sorry.
Thanks. I appreciate it. No, I made sure to check. And no, that dweeb was definitely not from Ohio State.
My bad.
Well,
although what I'm hoping we get to at some part is like dweeb officers that we've had, because they are aplenty.
That was actually a pretty accurate,
iconic story about a real girl boss that I used to work for in the Navy. If we want to ever get there,
I'm definitely down to hear those stories. The shitty politics point I think is interesting though, because I mean I definitely talked about it this morning a little bit with Karthik. And it seems like the two, he's building kind of a spectrum, which the spectrum is guy who follows the rules and like, seriously believes in like the rules of engagement or the rules of combat, and guy who wants to break all of the rules of engagement and just wants to like win the war. Mm-hmm. So like the spectrum that he's building, I mean, probably is realistic to the Vietnam War, but like it is, I mean, the politics are shitty because I don't think it goes any farther than that. Like the only other thing they could really show is somebody like injuring themselves to get out of the war, which they do show. Like, I don't think that there's much space for political involvement in the middle of the Vietnamese jungle.
No, I mean, yeah, like it's the Black Hawk Down line. Like once the first bullet goes past your head, politics and all that shit goes right out the window. Like, which is true. I mean, like, I definitely like the interplatoon politics definitely are accurate. Like, I think that Oliver Stone does a good job of, like, it's a very rare movie or a very unique movie that it like literally the entire thing takes place in Vietnam. You don't see anyone back home at the fucking malt shop, talking about gearing up to go fucking to war or anything beforehand. It is just in the shit the whole time. And all you get is little glimpses of what might be waiting for them after or what might be before. And not that much of it. It's really just
like, and nothing's waiting for them after. Like that's kind of the point that he drives home. I mean, to the point of kind of being pretentious about it at times. Like, he's like, well, I was rich and I went to a good college, but everybody else.
Aren't you fuckers happy for me? Aren't you glad I'm here?
I was laughing so hard at that part where they were like, you voluntarily came here? Like he's like, yeah, why do only poor kids have to go? I'm like, man, if someone would have looked me in my eye when I was in the Navy and said that to me, I would have taken a ball bat to their knees immediately. That is like, it's literally, but it's there are definitely people like that join the military.
Oliver Stone.
Like,
Yep.
Like we talk a lot about like the poverty draft and like other reasons people join. That was why I joined, was because recruited out of a literal homeless shelter. But there are absolutely people that I met in the military that were like, oh yeah, you know, I just like, I wanted to be something bigger than myself, something greater than I am. And it's like, what? Loser.
Well, the backstory of it is that Oliver Stone was going to Yale.
Yeah.
And was literally in classes with George W. Bush. And his parents were like these conservative Republicans who had all served in different wars. I think his father served in World War II. His grandfather served in World War I.
Talk about a missed fragging opportunity.
Yeah. He could have fucking fragged George W. Bush and no one would have. No, so his whole backstory, and I have a clip of it, but I don't think I really want to. I mean, I don't think it's really worth playing. But he's talking about how he went to Yale and he was kind of lost at Yale and didn't quite know what he wanted to do. Started like skipping out of classes, and then once they were like, you know, you have to go to class. He's like, well, you know what? Fuck you. I'm going to Vietnam instead. And
what a Chad thing to do.
What if they had just listen? Totally different timeline. Oliver Stone gets invited to the Skull and Bones fucking meeting. Then this is all done. He's just jealous that George W. gets to go hang out, do the Skull and Bones, you know, thing, and fucking, you know, what, like jack off into Geronimo's skull or whatever it is those fucking psychos do.
Yeah, do the David Cameron type shit where you have the pig's head and you stick your dick in the pig's head.
Yeah, you fuck a pig's skull or yeah.
Listen, I zoned out for about 30 solid seconds there, and I came back in at a.
No, Erica, the Skull and Bones Society, if you're not aware of it, is a collection of psychos at Yale, and
this isn't real.
No, this is real. This is real.
Please don't give me something else I need to be anxious
It's like
about.
a club. It's a secret club for little fucking blue bloods to join. And then they went and dug up Geronimo, the native militant leader. They dug up his skull and they like fucking do little rituals, weird, like they do weird rituals and shit with it to like induct people. And then they all end up joining the CIA afterwards.
Or well, they all end up either going to like the Supreme Court. A lot of times they end up going into like being like a president, being a vice president, being a senator. Like it's all those types of people that have like a long history of.
This isn't real. You guys are fucking with me. This is like an episode of The Simpsons.
Real, Erica.
No, it's not.
It's real. It's real. Look it
What's
up.
it called again? I'm gonna Google it right now.
Skull and Bones Society. Look it up, Erica. It's real. I promise you.
So pretty much you got that like Oliver just trying to walk behind George Bush and like he's like, hey Ollie, this ain't for you.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't fucking belong here.
Yeah, and then he's like, well, gosh dang it, you know where I do belong? Vietnam.
But then in the movie, they're like, you don't belong in the Nam. Like, so it's like, you know, like there's no winning for Oliver Stone. He never quite finds his niche because
that's because he thinks that like the war, like basically the whole idea is like, you know, if everyone had listened to Sergeant Elias is decent at fighting, but he's too dumb to realize that Barnes is about to smoke him when he's literally got a gun trained on him and he's about to try and get him thrown in the brig, right?
Well, he's
like
he's very impish. Willem Dafoe's portrayal of him,
yes.
Like he's kind of like a wood nymph. Like he's hopping through the woods and like he's like, don't worry, I'm light on my feet and like hopping.
Yeah, like a hobbit.
Yeah, well, not because a hobbit kind of goes low to the ground. He's kind of up. He almost floats.
He's like a raptor.
The jungle.
Or like a Legolas. Like a Legolas. Then he's an elf. He's like running on the snow.
Like a Legolas. And so he's like hopping through, and then he sees Barnes, who he supposedly has like this blood feud with, and he smiles at him like, "Oh man!" And then he sees his eyes, and he's like, "Oh no, fuck! He's gonna kill me. He's gonna frag me right now."
I hope I don't get smoked just now. Yeah, well, like that's Oliver Stone's politics too. Is just like that. Elias is just a Democrat. He's just a guy.
Yeah.
He's like just as bloodthirsty and believes just as fervently in the fucking doomed mission, even though he knows it's lost. And then he's too dumb to realize he's about to get smoked by the guy who will do the things that he won't. You know what I mean?
Well,
like
he's living in a state of cynicism, I think, but like without a way to really get out of it, right? Like he's one of the people that joined the war fully gung ho, thinking like I'm gonna go in and like fuck up these like Vietnamese people, like you know what I mean? Like we're just gonna destroy the fucking NVA, like it's gonna be fine. He gets into the war and realizes like, oh no, we're gonna lose this war, and still has to maintain his position in the war. Still, still is in this probably like extended his own combat, like deferment. You know what I mean? Like I guarantee
I mean
he did.
that's like I guess like part of the like untold story is that like if they're like the sergeants there, they've been there, like everyone's like counting down their year, but the sergeants like those they are there they're there for a long time. And so, and like that's what he's like talking about Barnes, and like even it's like he's unkillable, when they talk about it, it's like so like not only can like Sergeant Barnes is like he's like fucking supposed to be like the fucking living T-1000 or some shit like that.
Yeah,
And,
but he isn't. I mean,
but no, right? Yeah,
kind of
like
is a point that they make in a lot of anti-war movies, like especially Vietnam movies. Is like the unkillable, quote unquote, unkillable people, because you either belong in the Nam or you don't, and that's kind of in Viet, like in a lot of anti-war Vietnam movies, like that's the dichotomy really. Like you either belong here or you don't belong here, and if you don't belong here, you're gonna die. The anti-war point is like, no, you're both gonna die. It just depends on when and how. Whether it's gonna be like in a moment of like, I don't want to say bravery, but like, bravery for your cause or whatever, and you're going in there and getting hit a million times, or are you gonna die running away from a foxhole? Like that's really the only difference.
I think the thing though is that an issue too, and I think about with Full Metal Jacket, or like any kind of like anti-war movie, is that if Charlie Sheen is the main character, and also kind of placed in a way that hey, like there's a lot of people who are going to identify with that, and maybe not like, oh, I am from fucking Yardale and I just decided to come fight in the muck with some of the poors, but
which is literally what
like that's literally what they fucking say. But also like that is the person that you are along with throughout the movie, and while they're like, oh, he gets injured, he starts kind of losing his commitment to reaching back home and discussing things. First he's writing letters all the time, and he eventually stops.
Who is fucking grandma, little grandma's boy.
Yeah. Fucking nerd.
Stupid nerd.
But after, I guess like that's the problem with any of these things, is that with Charlie Sheen, they make it out. Joker from Metal, like he survived. They make it out. The person that you are riding along with the movie, really, you make it to the exit and say, well, now I get to live my life.
I think that there should be an anti-war movie where the main character just gets fucking obliterated in the first 5 minutes, and then that's the movie. It's over.
Anti-war, the most successful anti-war filmmaking is short films.
Seriously, like it's I overanalyzed part of that movie in between my sob fests. Thanks again for the no warning there.
About the war crimes?
It technically is Tropic Thunder. It's just Tropic Thunder under very different circumstances.
It was very sad. Anyway, I came into it like I was like, I'm gonna smoke weed. I'm gonna watch this movie. It's gonna be great. Have you ever cried while you're high? That shit is awful. Anyway, something that kind of drove me a little crazy, and the way, if I were to take the movie and it was like, okay, you can only change one thing, right? Like one theme in the movie. I do not like the fact that it made it look like the person, like the college boy, was like the moral authority in that movie. Like this person from a wealthy background, because I'm like, maybe I'm alone or maybe I'm not here. The psychopaths I met in the military were the ones that had a stable home life and like came from money, already went to college.
Yeah.
It wasn't the poor people that were there, because you can look at other people and empathize and sympathize with them of like their living conditions. But like a lot of times it was the people that did come from like money in their background, those were the nut jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think
And
a big part of
that's
it,
what I would change.
a big part of it is who tells these stories.
Yeah.
Because clearly Charlie Sheen in this movie is Oliver Stone.
Yeah.
Like he's telling his own war story. And
yeah, I know.
But he's also clearly reacting to Apocalypse Now, and kind of making his own version of a movie like that. They literally went to the Philippines to worked with the Marcos dictatorship, the fucking far right like fascist dictatorship, the same as Coppola did.
Yeah.
Like took the same military equipment that they did when they made Apocalypse Now, and he's saying, well, you don't really know, you don't really understand Vietnam, you don't really understand war. This is what it's really like, and it's. I think the same thing is true in like Full Metal Jacket, because it's kind of the story of the journalist that ended up surviving through it, and he had written like it is based on a book. So like who's telling these stories kind of matters in that sense, and like who gets to express themselves, and every single time it's somebody telling their own story, which means that they've survived the war.
Yes. Look, I think I mean, if I could offer my opinion, like the note, Kubrick did not go to Nam, but his conclusions about it, I think, are much better than Oliver Stone's. Like
Kubrick didn't go to Nam, but the Joker character co-wrote the screen, like the actual guy. I think it was based on a book. So
it's
like
by the Short Timers or something it was called, right?
Yeah. So I mean, but he's telling his own story, and he's obviously after the war a journalist, the same as he was during the war, but like obviously doing war propaganda and then turning against the war later on. So it's still kind of a similar like that guy is a kind of PMC journalist when he gets out of the war.
Oh,
and like this is my story, and these are the people I met. So Eric, I agree with your point that I think that those would be much more real and like real and like really just cutting stories in these senses. But it's everybody trying to tell their own story of what happened to them in the war, and obviously that means that they both made it out of the war, and that they have some kind of career where they're trying to get publicity for it after the fact.
Like that's the thing, is like outside of some of like these like weird like I don't know, just psychopaths that are like, I'm gonna do something heroic, which like these people exist. This is like a real fucking thing. It is almost completely just a group of people who are constantly saying, fuck this shit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's not, I don't know how interesting that's going to be, but like, that's the thing is like, as we're discussing kind of like these characters, like even myself, I'm like filling in the dots of like, who are the people that I served with that, I mean, like, I never served with a quote unquote Sergeant Barnes that like would maniacally murder anyone. like never happened, right? But like, yeah, the officer who is just lost in the sauce, and I'll say it, like literally has no business being here. Like, you get out of here. You don't. You definitely don't belong here.
Yeah.
Or just really even some of the other platoon people around who are like, literally, what are they always saying? This is bullshit. Like, why are you sending my squad? Like, it's their turn.
Yep.
Like, getting it, like, just that. No one likes it. It just all fucking sucks.
The politics of who has to go on ambush tonight.
Yes. Who's on watch?
I think Oliver Stone did a good job showing that part of it. Definitely.
Very much did.
I guess my point is that like, if you're actually going to take into account the stories outside of these PMC writers, you're going to get a story of just like people just saying this fucking sucks.
Yeah.
Over and over again.
Petty nonsense that happens between people. That's like leads up to massive conflicts that are literally life and death.
And I think that I think that specifically in Platoon, I think that Oliver Stone did try to show that as much as he could. I mean, a lot of times I think he tried to channel it through like the black squad members, and I don't know if he necessarily did a great job with that, because he was trying to like also comment on the civil rights and like black nationalist stuff going on at the same time. But like I do think that he did try to show that. I mean, the majority of the characters in Platoon aren't Elias or Barnes. You know what I mean? Like the majority of the characters are either scared of the psychopaths or the, and I think Karthik and I talked about this earlier. I don't know what you guys think about this. I think that like there's definitely a difference between Barnes kind of being a complete kind of sociopath, I guess, and then that like bunny redneck dude being like a literal psychopath. Like, you know what I mean? Like actually taking pleasure in causing that harm, which I don't necessarily. Barnes kind of seemed like he was incredibly ultra conservative in the sense of being like, you know what, like we're not going to win this war unless I literally kill civilians, and it's all the same to me. But it doesn't seem like he was necessarily taking pleasure in that the same way that like that redneck that was just like, let me just bash in a mentally challenged guy's skull was.
In both cases, it's interesting how like it's not a kind of depiction of like any kind of superiority, but like actually the opposite. It's just like pure downright like impotence. These are kind of characters who I feel like are not actually even experts in anything that they're setting out to do, and they seem to largely be clueless. And as you're pointing out, a lot of the kind of action is totally out of their hands, and like they're totally out of their depths, and because of that, like the whole experience becomes counting down to the day that they get to go back. And like it's interesting how there's a parallel between that and like, I mean, more obviously a carceral experience. Like Shawshank Redemption has the same kind of like cross sign of like him getting out in the end, escaping from prison, and like Willem Dafoe
or even The Wire. The Wire does a great job with that too, where he's like, "There's only 2 days: the day you come out, or the day you go in, and the day you come out." Like that line happens over and over again.
Or even the institutionalization that happens within it, like Morgan Freeman doesn't want to leave Shawshank, just like Bunny doesn't want to leave the army because he gets to do whatever the fuck he wants.
Right.
And that type of person can't survive on the outside. I don't think. Like I don't think that like after Vietnam, that guy would not have been able to reintegrate into society in any capacity.
No, we all knew people who stayed in the military because there's nothing else they can fucking do, and that's where and those people get promoted and end up in charge of you.
Yeah, like really, like like the only, it's like I guess from whatever understanding of success that can be put together in the United States military, those type of people who are just like, completely self-aware that like literally outside of the locker room where they're the most extreme fucking piece of shit, like the military is the place for them, and like they're not going to go anywhere. As long as they don't get kicked out, they're not going anywhere. But I mean, that's something with Karthik, when you make the comparison of like carceral and everything like that, it's like we call it getting, like getting out. Like when you're getting out, that is how we talk about like when is your contract finished, but you say getting out and it's almost like it is discussed in a similar fucking way. Obviously it's not the same thing, but that's kind of like the ticking down.
What do you think of that final the final conclusion, kind of that that it's not the people like Bunny who end up, I mean, at least specifically in Vietnam and the Tet Offensive, like it's not the people like Bunny that end up moving up. It's not the people like Elias that end up obviously moving up because he's causing trouble. It's not the people like Barnes that end. It's just kind of like it's like Dr. Cox and like the guy that was like the guy that was like, you can't do that, man. Like that guy, like, you know what I mean? It's
Italian excellence. You talk about Ramucci.
So I guess the point that he's making is it's not the people that seem like they're going to survive Vietnam, and it's not the people that seem like they're not going to survive Vietnam. Like at the end of this specific, I mean, at the Tet Offensive is in itself a very specific traumatic moment for the U.S. military, for the U.S. population. And I have a clip to play in a couple minutes for that. But like, I guess so. At the end of it is kind of like they're promoting whoever's left. Like neither the people that seem like they're going to survive or the people that seem like they're going to die. It's kind of like the middle people, whoever's like kind of in the middle and just kind of getting along to go along.
I think Oliver Stone's doing the meek shall inherit the earth thing there. But like, that's my problem with That's my problem with the conclusions he reaches at the end of the movie. Like I was saying, like when I saw this movie in high school, like I arrived at the same conclusion by watching that movie when I was a child. That like, war is cool. You just need to be cool while you're doing it, and if everyone's cool, then war is good. And like that's kind of the conclusion I felt like Oliver arrived at after going to Vietnam, which is not at all the conclusion I arrived at when I came back from Afghanistan. It's the true. I mean, I was talking about I was asking Marcus about this earlier, but like I think a better movie, like both at the end of Bridge Over the River Kwai, the guy just going madness, madness. Everyone's fucking dead. Everyone just fucking killed each other for God knows why. It's just fucking pure madness. There's no rhyme or reason. There's no ideology behind it. It's just fucking murder. Like they just killed each other. And like at the end of Full Metal Jacket, it's a bunch of guys literally singing, a bunch of children literally singing Mickey Mouse to each other.
Yeah. I mean, I think Full Metal Jacket kind of takes a more absurdist turn there.
Yes.
And trying to show you that literally, like it trying to juxtapose the fact that the girl that they end up all killing, that's the the sniper is kind of just some young girl. Like she's not anybody. The NBA is kind of just training people who truly do believe in their own liberation. Like people that are kind of like acting far more heroically, I'd say, than the U.S. troops are.
In Platoon too, those fucking NVA guys own. There's like two guys who can fight in all of Platoon, Barnes and Elias, and like the NVA owns the rest of them. They're way better equipped. They're way better trained. They're more disciplined. They're fighting for their whole. They have a better cause. It's just a bunch of pot smoking idiots, fucking literally sucking on 12 gauges until they kill each other in the American military.
Like, when do I get to go home? I mean, there is no cause, and on the American side, like, and I think that is a point that Oliver Stone makes well throughout this, is that nobody really cares or knows why they're there. I think Full Metal Jacket makes it pretty well too, with everybody just kind of being like, well, they're Vietnamese and we're Americans, and we don't really like, they don't even really know who they're fighting. Like the North Vietnamese knows exactly who the fuck they're fighting.
Yep.
There's especially like beginning, like the beginning stages of Afghanistan, the like resurgence, and then also too it's like the beginning pushes in Iraq, which is all precursors to my enlistment. I came in the Marine Corps in 2010. The people who taught me they were the fucking Lance Corporals and PFCs and shit, when that was all going on.
Yeah.
And it is like, there's just, it is chaos. And there's like 18, 19-year-old dudes that literally like 9-10 years later are still have some sort of pride in what they've done.
Yeah.
But what do they have to show for it? Like, I mean, it's some people like just crazy videos of, oh, hey, I found this lizard and bit its head off for a bag of Doritos.
Yeah.
Like just a bunch of dudes out in the fucking desert doing wild ass shit for no reason at all. Getting to sleep in one of Saddam's palaces and like getting some just crazy fucking video, and it's like, what is the point of this? And especially when you put on the back of a million dead Iraqis,
And then I mean, at the point of Vietnam, which is kind of the original kind of version of the kind of forever wars that we're doing now, like Iraq, Afghanistan, like in a similar vein, and obviously bad policy. Like, and the terrible policy that goes along with that, where we don't quite understand how to fight, like guerrilla rebel groups or like cells that are trying to actually liberate themselves. Like we don't have like you can't really like push yourself as an empire into that situation and be like, like we're gonna send just a bunch of people in there and we're gonna just keep bombing the shit out of them until they finally relent. They don't relent, and so that's something that we learn, I think, over and over again in the last 50 years of American foreign policy, starting in Vietnam. And in a similar way, like I think that it's I mean, it's interesting that now with the advent of like social media and phones, like people can kind of take these videos, and that's not necessarily a strategy, or not a strategy, but like an idea that they had, I think, in in Vietnam. I mean, maybe pictures. You can send home some like, you know, some graphic pictures, but like it's interesting that it's kind of this individualist idea of like, well, I could do this in battle, and then someone could take a picture of it, or I could. I mean, like you're saying, with sleeping in Saddam's palace, like I could sleep in Saddam's palace, and then I'll get a video of it and send that video home, and it's like it doesn't really mean anything, like, and you're still gonna have to live with yourself at some point.
That's the epitome of that is the operator fucking tactical bullshit that you see now, which is like the antithesis of what you see here in Platoon, right? Is like these are the miserable grunts who are in the mud and the shit and counting the days till they're done, not wanting to be there. But like we commodified the rut. We made the operator culture, and now you've got guys who like literally two guys competing to say which one of them killed bin Laden so they can make a bigger t-shirt company.
Yeah. So I have this. I think the you know, the OG version of it is obviously Vietnam, and the Tet Offensive is kind of this moment where I think for the first time the U.S. really realizes that we don't have a strategy or a policy that can really, you know, push us through this kind of conflict. Like it's a never-ending conflict. So I have a clip of Oliver Stone talking about that in terms of making Platoon.
I just want to say, historically, the battle was not reported on. We were the 25th Infantry Division, and it was not a glamorous division. There's very little press. We never saw press. I didn't know what had happened. We don't know the size of it. But what's interesting about the battle is that it grows in perspective, because I was approached by a young man who had interviewed a lot of people there and was writing a book about it. And it was the beginning of the Tet Offensive, and we didn't know it. You see, what they were doing, the Vietnamese were doing all through that October, November, December, was gathering intelligence and moving munitions, moving men, moving all kinds of things down to the south. Saigon, if they had cut Saigon, if they cut across Saigon and taken it the way they wanted to, or at least damaged it enough to psychologically destroy us, cut off our sense of unity with the North, they would have, that would have been the objective. I always believed that all the activity in the North between the Marines, who got all the press, and the NVA, the bombing at Khe Sanh, those battles, there were quite a few battles, ugly battles, but that was where they seemed like the hottest action was. But in a fight, and the Vietnamese are very smart, you throw the left, you save the right. And I think the right hook, the knockout blow was to Saigon, because they came so close to taking Saigon. They took Saigon almost the entire night, and it was a bloody battle for Saigon. So that was the objective, and I think we were one of the first to encounter them. The other thing that is in aftermath you're aware of is we kept finding intelligence. We'd be in the bush and we'd find stuff, bunkers, lots of supplies, but we found a lot of paper and a lot of intelligence, which we would gather, and I mean stacks of it, and they would come out. The intelligence people from Saigon would fly out, and they'd collect all this stuff. And I was wondering later in time, where did this go? You know, why were we so surprised? And I do think that we had very poor analysis. In fact, General Westmoreland came out to that battle, and he stood there. I don't know what he was saying, but he examined and he left on his helicopter. But I heard later that he criticized us for not having been well dressed and not looking like troops, which in a way exemplifies the American attitude towards the war. Here's our leading general, who I think was not very bright, saying, counting bodies. Body count was crucial in Vietnam. It didn't matter if it was a civilian or not sometimes, but that was what added to the body count. And he was like saying, well, if we kill enough of them, how come they keep coming? And that was indeed what happened, because the Vietnamese kept replenishing themselves. I don't know how. They were like the ants.
Oh my!
And that's true. God. And they could not solve this war through body count. And of course, his concern about uniforms and communications and discipline in the wrong sense of the word is what led us to this awful strategy.
Did he say that somebody else compared them to ants, or did he make?
No, he compared them to ants.
Wow.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a little bit of a problematic undertone with the way that.
Yeah.
Can that be considered an undertone?
It's pretty
problematic
on the nose,
overtone there.
A problematic overlay.
I was like, it's interesting how, like, I was gonna ask the question of how if this was one of the earliest instances of like an outright depiction of failure in a war, rather than like atrocity or like any kind of like, because all of that does happen, but eventually the whole story is like, it's not some kind of operatic tragedy or anything like that. It's actually somebody getting their ass handed to them, and like and really brutally, and like to the extent of how, like, the scene with Willem Dafoe in the end is like, it's a representation of the outcome of the war itself, and like he saw the plane take off without him, and like it was over even before that, but like it just sealed the fate even more so. But in the end, like, I don't know, there does seem to be an air of like pride behind the way that he's speaking nonetheless. So I wonder what do you think of this notion of like still feeling like you had some kind of strategic knowledge and upper hand and all of that, but at the same time really talking about people who had no clue what they were doing and really got outclassed, it seems like, even from the movie.
Yeah, and he seems like he's not really going with his own screenwriting there too. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
He's like, oh well, like, but throughout the movie, you do see every time they're like, oh, there's maps here. Like, there's maps here. Like, they pick up the maps and they make that point, and then either something explodes, like that one scene
Right.
with Sal from Do the Right Thing, and
it's important, man. This is important.
Yeah. No, so like you do kind of see him making that point throughout the movie too, that it's like they're finding this intelligence, and they're like, there's maps here, and then everything kind of explodes around them. But it's also, we were talking about this morning, the neoliberalization of everything kind of starts with the Vietnam War, because the body counts and like body count being the central metric to whether or not you're winning the war.
The McNamara fallacy.
Yeah. And but that kind of is continued in every single, like, I mean, obviously, like, targeted education, like how many people graduate is kind of like the neoliberalization of education. It's like,
well, I like, we don't have to really like go into domestic policy. Like, this is almost like exactly mirrored to today, and
yeah, in Afghanistan especially.
Shameless plug. So on the stream, we watch some committee hearings and everything like that. General Miley, Lloyd Austin. Today, you had Joe Manchin, good old Joe Manchin, mentioning, "A, sorry, I was injured, so I couldn't go to Vietnam. But B, how is this different?" Right? You have Joe Manchin saying, "How is it any different? I thought we learned our lesson that we can't just go into another country and nation build." And like the ants comment, there's this discussion of how the Afghan army is somehow like just blumbering fools that can't do anything to help themselves, while they're also saying there is no Afghan army without the supply chain and government contractors that come with the U.S. military presence.
Yeah,
that was pulling out.
Mm-hmm.
And you have that with like the planes. They keep bringing planes into Afghanistan and being like, well, if there's no one here, who's going to service the planes?
Yeah,
watching that clip
exactly. Yes, that's the thing, is that like you don't have the U.S. military without this indescribably massive, right? Largest in the world. We are not, like when you're talking legions of Rome times a million, like this is empire on steroids. And you can't just replicate that, especially when the source is coming from across the globe.
Oh, I have something controversial.
Uh-oh.
I have a spicy take, and it's not even that spicy to people who are leftists or people that were in the military. The only reason we're like a powerful military is literally only the money. The people are useless.
Yes.
I'm telling you. Like, I'm telling you, like.
What?
Yes.
No, I'm serious. Like, if there was actual combat, like, so when we were shot at, right? I joined the Navy because I was told by my recruiter, they lie, that it was the safest branch. He was wrong. And whenever we got shot at the first time, if they would have hit us, we would have died. Like, our people that are supposed to do the air missile shit panicked and just stopped and they just didn't do their job.
Yes.
When I got called out the next day, when we were getting shot at again, but with ammo instead of a rocket, they had us go out at like 2 a.m. Guys, I don't know how to tell you this. They put me behind a 50 cal, and I literally was like, I don't know what the fuck I'm
doing. you just keep slinging it back.
I'm trying to like rack it back, and I can't even rack it back.
Oh no!
So 50 cals, like when they're mounted on the ship, if you don't have enough ass to put into it, you have to like stand up on the side of the ship and pull in order to rack it back, especially because you have salt water getting into it every day and it gets
50
corroded.
cal's hard to rack even if it's not. Oil.
Yeah. Tell me that more. Thank you. But I'm so serious when I say there were so many times where I was like, listen, everyone, we need to leave. We cannot go out here and start shit. We will die. But the only reason was the money. And that's part of the reason I feel like sometimes they have to throw so much money at it is because like the personnel. No, there is a reason the Taliban took over in 3 days.
You really couldn't be more right about this, Erica. I can say the same for the Army. I was like 170 pounds soaking wet. And I was like, I never identify with a man more than when Willem Dafoe has an M60 across his shoulders and just looks haggard at one point, like his skinny ass carrying a machine. That was me in Afghanistan. They gave me medals. Like they were like, I was like talk about the lack of personnel and like expertise and like badassery in a platoon. They were like, you're up there, Sergeant Warlock. We're going to promote you and we're going to give you medals for bravery. I'm like, I'm just trying to live, man.
But it's similar with the body counts though too, right? Like the more medals they give out, the more it seems like our army is doing something.
Yes.
So it's like a similar point, I guess, that gets made throughout.
Yeah. No, and the thing, like the neoliberalism running the show, which and it's like like Erica had actually watched this, like we watched this fucking great video, and it has to deal with like the dangers of white feminism, and like guess what, like Forever Wars was like
Girl Boss Wars, Afghanistan.
The first like feminist wars.
Yes.
In that,
which I know sounds crazy. As much as I hate women and I want to blame us for everything all the time, think of the first thing that started getting shoved through the news cycle as soon as they talked about leaving Afghanistan. But what about the women? What about the women and children?
Also, what's really messed up too is that like the Afghan war is really the first time that women military leaders, women foreign policy decision makers are the ones running the show. And it's kind of like this, Condoleezza Rice, Hillary Clinton, Marine Corps FET teams, and you've got these generals. Exactly. Like we are.
And man, they make you feel like a girl boss too. Yes. When you're when they came to me and they were like, you would be the first woman on our ship to go to VBSS training, and I was just like, first woman, what? And then and then I went to VBSS training and I was like, this shit sucks, which is visit board search and seizure.
Oh my God.
It's fucking Captain Phillips shit, like going on to pirates. And so I was like, well, this sucks. And I was like, well, thank God I'm a sonar technician and I'll never have to use this. Fast forward 3 weeks and, and I'm in the middle of the Gulf. getting onto boats, and I was just like, this is girl boss. I don't know about you
I bet
guys.
you're wondering how I got here.
Yeah. But that's the thing, though, is that and even to this, right to this day, you've got people decrying how these Afghan women. But it's like, if you actually listen to Afghan women, they probably would have said, please don't arm the Taliban or the Mujahideen 40 fucking years ago. Don't give theocratic and fascist propaganda to them so that they can fucking learn from it. And then also, don't invade and try and get Al Qaeda and Bin Laden when the Taliban were going to offer him up. Please stop invading after you kill Bin Laden.
They
And
offered
Al
to
Qaeda
step
has been
down.
gone at that point. By the time they killed Bin Laden, Al Qaeda was almost like completely gone out of Afghanistan for almost a decade at that point. And so like there's really no consideration for any of these things, but it's just a girl boss metric that got thrown into this war, instead of like we're just spending freedom and democracy doesn't necessarily fly anymore, but it's still the same bullshit lie.
They had one of Afghanistan's like most prominent feminist leaders going, you know what, like I would rather have the Taliban. Like literally, there was I don't remember if it was, I think it was Now This put out a video right around the time that Biden announced that we were leaving, and it was like one of Afghanistan's like most prominent, like, because there are Afghanistan feminists that like have that have voices.
Yes.
We don't hear them on cable news or on any kind of mainstream show, but like they exist. No one's asking them. No one's asking them, hey, do you want to get saved by the U.S. military right now and have another few years of invasion and like a few more years of fighting? No, they don't. Like they're like, we'll take our chances. Like there's a I mean,
they were the ones saying don't create a fucking Afghan government with these corrupt warlord assholes.
Yeah,
and we didn't listen to them, and look what happened.
Speaking of how the treatment of women, the only scene I think, unless I'm mistaken, that involves women in this movie is kind of like it lays bare the nature, and like it puts to bed the entire like presumption that like the US troops are going there with any intention of saving these women in these countries, and it's just like it's insane how Forrest and I were talking about it, how in Full Metal Jacket, I could be forgetting, or in Apocalypse Now, the portrayal of the women was like, they were much older at the very least, even if or like they were like seen as deceptive or like sexually promiscuous or some sort of
it's Full Metal Jacket.
Apologia.
There are no. I don't think there even are women in Apocalypse Now.
Right, but Full Metal Jacket, right? So I just wanted to say that like in this movie, it makes clear that these are not like some kind of young women who are
there's the Playboy
or anything like that.
Wait, I need to back
children.
There's the Playboy. There's the Playboy.
Yes.
The bunnies. There's like the Playboy whatever dancers that do the those are the only women in
and a riot starts.
Yeah. So but yeah, no, it's Full Metal Jacket. They have Vietnamese women. There's no Vietnamese women in Apocalypse Now.
In Apocalypse Now, right? Sorry.
Yeah.
But in this movie, they kind of make it very clear that, and in fact, like I kind of have this wild theory that like the whole movie is just basically a Final Destination style like slasher film of like them getting what's coming to them for what they did in the village raid or something like that. Because like you see kind of like the characters who get to leave or survive, they tend to earn their kind of place by, for example, Taylor killing Barnes and thus getting to leave, and like the killing of Barnes, Forrest and I were talking about this earlier as well, like is a necessary act, and maybe like Oliver Stone is like using this as a message to even say that like you've got to kill Barnes in order for you to earn your place back in like polite society, as a metaphor.
You've got to kill your own Staff Sergeant Barnes,
Yeah.
Kill the Staff Sergeant Barnes in your mind first.
God damn it! I was gonna make that joke. Ooh. No, that scene.
Inside of you, there are two wolves.
That scene, though, it was the small detail I want to make sure I add there is it was girls. It wasn't women. It was two little girls.
Yes, it was children. Yeah, it was children basically.
And
which it is in Full Metal Jacket too, but older girl, like teenage girls, rather than in this like literal little girls.
And I mean, if your goal is to depict like the horrors of war, that should be in there. That's not fake. That happens. Like, not to pick on a certain branch here, but have you guys ever Googled Marine Corps and Japan ever? Like, they literally get locked down in the country. Like, the bases get locked down because they can't stop sexually assaulting women in town.
I will say that the Navy with Marine Corps, Department of the Navy.
I know.
No, and like this is the fucking branch, yeah. But like that's the thing though, it's like, so you're talking about the island of Okinawa.
Yeah, that's
almost 40% of the island is owned by the United States military.
Mm-hmm.
And then even going into like, if you're talking about the highest rates, sexual assault, violence, and everything like that, it's around military bases in Japan. You go to Okinawa, like also too is like just even like the metrics of like the health of the people on the island has gone fucking down because of the diet that the United States military has imported, i.e. fucking McDonald's and Bennigan's and Friendlies and all of the fucking
We had
bullshit.
a Burger King in Kandahar.
Yes, right, man. A green bean, dog. You got to get that fucking bullshit ass coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's also kind of the Kissinger motto, right? Like anywhere that there's a McDonald's or like you know what I mean, like is somewhere that the U.S. is going to impose their will on. Like, that's our way out.
Quarter pounder with cheese equals freedom.
Yes.
Yeah, no, like our way of like really, savaging our way out of the Cold War is like, I mean, like the bombing in Cambodia and Laos, that's one thing, but like really just imposing McDonald's on them. That's the end.
Gorbachev did a Pizza Hut commercial.
This is actually the second episode in a week. This is actually the second episode in a week that Gorbachev's Pizza Hut commercial has come up on.
Really?
Legendary. It's legendary.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what I was saying about, like, that's real and it's also ignored. It's ignored within the military. Like they do like your sexual assault prevention training once a year where it's like, hey, fellas, let's not rape this year, right?
It's literally a joke most of the time.
Yeah. And then, I regurgitate it all the time, but 87% of women in the military will be sexually harassed at work, and at least half will be raped.
Yeah,
and that's just what we know of by other service members.
When it's touched on, it's within the U.S. military. Like when it's brought up, kind of as a statistic, like like.
Well, no, I'm saying that like that's within the ranks, and then out of it, it's even fucking worse. Like it's like that's what they're doing to people they view as equals. What I'm saying is
when the metrics about sexual assault do get touched on, no pun intended, with the U.S. military, it's always within the ranks, or it's always on bases in the U.S.
Like, well, that's the only place we have records of it too. Yeah. That's the issue.
I mean, even
here.
we didn't even start counting, like really taking account all of the casualties in Afghanistan until like 9 years in, and that was
and
like
there was like a project,
and
like that was like outside groups doing projects, not even the military.
And I think even like there's like just some like funding that was like allocated from Congress to like help along, but no, like you're right. It's like even though it's like, but like we talk about that as like the proof, right? It's like you're gonna like because even today they're mentioning, like it was fucking Nazi Josh Hawley talking about how many of these like how many child brides have you found on the flight on those flights of Afghans coming over, and it's like literally it's like how in the fuck are you going to even try to say you care about women? And I'm sorry I'm cursing so much. Like I know that YouTube has like a thing or whatever. Like
we're not monetized yet.
So. Well, how in the fuck are you going to try and exert some type of moral dominance over anyone? Some type of like moral hierarchy to say like we are the ones that protect women when like literally the women who are in uniform serving alongside you. Hell, no longer, former Senator McSally She was the Air Force girl boss. She was sexually assaulted herself. And not only that, but as she's talking about it, can't even get a bill through Congress to address any of it.
Yep.
And a large part of it, I think, is because it's still unspoken, but kind of part of a war strategy, right? Like keeping everybody that's not within the U.S. military, but like elsewhere, like you know what I mean, like. When we have a base somewhere, it's kind of within the same range of like intimidation and absolute destruction that kind of comes with the U.S. military wherever it goes. Like the reason that we don't, talk about it, or the reason that those metrics don't get counted, the reason that nobody in the military really cares about it is because it's. I mean, and I think that's kind of what Oliver Stone was touching on in Platoon. Is it's kind of very much part of the military strategy. Like sexual assault is part of the military strategy. They don't want to they want to keep people as violent and brutal and, as abhorrent as possible in those circumstances.
And like that's where it's like kind of because there's something that he actually mentioned in that little interview clip of like it is two things, and I think they actually might be a little bit connected. One, he said he was jealous of, well, he didn't say he was jealous. I think he was jealous of the Marines getting more media attention than the Army, right?
You dude. Oh no, they got all the stories.
They got all the stories about them, right?
By
but
the way,
thing is too
also,
is like
25th Infantry Division, they're called the Tropic Lightning.
Oh.
Which is like literally Tropic Thunder is one word different.
Yes.
25th, they call it Tropic Lightning because they're stationed in Hawaii at Schofield.
Okay, well, I didn't cry during that movie, and I cried a lot during this. So, what's your point? Like, what's the point?
Sorry, Marcus, you were saying something.
I know I cried because of blackface when I watched Tropic Thunder. You're racist if you enjoy it. No, I just but no, the second thing is like when the general comes in, right? What does he mention? The general was like too focused on discipline in the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
You guys don't look professional, right? Mm-hmm. And as a United States fucking Marine, I can tell you that looking professional, that's what the Marine Corps fucking does. And like out of any of the branches, is the Marine Corps the best at fighting? Fuck no. We all suck at fighting. Like Erica had mentioned earlier, we all suck. What are we the best at? Marketing. Like, that's it.
Fighting dragons, bro.
Fighting motherfucking dragons. And, the sword pop up, man. That fucking snap and pop. All that shit. But that is actually some of the things of some of the narratives that some of these fucking branches actually take on. Is the Marines looking fucking good in the blues, standing in front of fucking embassies, and I don't know what the fucking deal is with the Army with like old Ironsides and all the fucking random shit. But like the Navy is like
Ironsides. That was a boat.
I don't
Not
know.
Even the right branch. If you're gonna talk shit, but no. Right? God damn.
The Army needs a fucking the Army doesn't have a narrative. That's the problem with the Army.
The Army had an esports team. Did the Marines? That's what I thought.
Have you even heard the Army song?
Enough of it. But I'm saying though, it's like Navy has this narrative, this global force for good, where it's like, oh, I get to help people, but also I get to travel the world, and like what comes with traveling the world is sexually assaulting the women of other fucking countries. They
also have the Village People song.
That is true. It's major,
that was why I joined the military, actually.
Air Force now, Air Force, Space Force, as this type of intellectual, and fighter pilots and all these it's like you have all these fucking ideas of what this thing is, but really it's like literally just either hurting fucking people, wasting the time of our young people, and then making huge profits for the military industrial complex. Like outside of that, that's fucking it. And I'll say this too. I don't know that there can be an anti-war movie centering anyone who is in the military.
Yep.
Because just the reality of Hollywood and cinema and spectacle, whoever is the center will be admired.
Yeah. And it comes up to who gets to tell these stories. And
yes.
It's people that number one lived through it, and it's people that went on to create these careers afterwards where public relations were a big part of it. And I also think that I remember we did Full Metal Jacket, we did Apocalypse Now on Give Them an Argument, and we had Micah Utrick, and who's like the deputy editor of Jacobin, and I can't remember. I think it was when we did Apocalypse Now that he made the point that like none of these movies really ever touch on Vietnamese characters, specifically in the Vietnam War, as a major part of it. Like it's always how Vietnamese. So I've thought about that a lot when watching any Vietnamese movie since then. Like it's always how American soldiers dealt with either the pain of causing destruction throughout a country, or it's what happened to American soldiers, or like the Vietnamese soldiers. And in this movie, I think especially when and he makes the point. Charlie Sheen's Oliver Stone's stand-in character makes the point, like well, we could have been fighting them, but we were fighting each other, and it's like, all right, but like, isn't the point that you shouldn't have been fighting them either? Like,
right?
Yeah.
Like,
right.
So you got two options really. It's like even like how Vietnamese people I think are depicted as like either these shadowy figures in the night that are going to slit your throat, or a body that you can do whatever the hell you want with.
Yeah.
I mean, the scene in the village has, I think, like the best depiction of, if we were to go by, WWE title standards, like the hero of the movie loses to this one-legged man whom he basically whose feet he shoots at, and like he's trying to get this person to like dance, motherfucker, and he kind of like he can't crush this person's spirit, and like I don't think that's psycho character.
I completely disagree with that being the point. I think that the point that they're making, that Oliver Stone's making with that scene, is that it's kind of you're realizing that somebody like Charlie Sheen, like that character, I think his name is Chris in this, Chris Taylor. But so you're realizing that like Chris Taylor / Oliver Stone is incredibly angry at that point, done with the war, and is willing to shoot at the guy's feet, but isn't willing to kill him. The only point that they're really making is that a character like Bunny or whatever, the redneck guy that comes up and actually like beats the guy's head in, is willing to like fully commit to the deed and kill the guy, and everyone else is horrified. So it's still about the reactions of U.S. soldiers to that death, rather than being anything about the spirit of a Vietnamese person.
But
even if you were to
dehumanized too, like the war makes Oliver Stone Charlie Sheen into a monster temporarily before he checks himself and actually kills someone.
As the real Charlie Sheen, really, he's a monster until he checks himself into rehab. Checks himself into rehab.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you were to make that scene like more about the revelation that like somebody else is willing to do what Chris Taylor is not willing to do, and it in a way like kind of supposed to make him look a little better and like the other person look worse or something. Even then, I feel like that whole scene was about like. With the I don't know if there was subtitled in the version that you saw, but I didn't see it subtitled at all, where the woman was yelling at them and they had no idea what she was saying, and then so the guy shot her in the head before that, and that's when like the whole thing happens right after that.
That happens right before.
In the head, like she
that's
yells
right before, I believe. I think that happens right before Barnes comes and shoots the woman in the head. They're intercut. Yeah. So no, sorry, not to interrupt your point that you're making, but I do think that it's important that you see the Bunny part first and then the Barnes part in that order. I do think that that's part of the storytelling.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I flipped the order by accident, but like basically, I'm getting to the point that like there was this exchange where this woman was kind of like yelling something at them, and it was completely untranslated, and it goes completely untranslated. And I mean, speaking of representation of the Vietnamese characters, it's kind of noteworthy that this is the only scene where like they have a speaking role, and it's kind of like it goes. And I don't think that this is the kind of thing that would have been deliberate, right? Like the whole idea is that like they, speaking of dehumanized, the Vietnamese characters have no face, as Marcus pointed out. Like they are just shadowy figures who are lurking, and like they're like ants, as he himself like kind of came out and said straight up. But like these three characters, I mean, when I say three characters, I also include the child who's sexually assaulted in this group, where like the spirit not being crushed is kind of like I feel like it's important to the message of the film itself, like, because what else is the point of like having this lost in translation moment, where like the brutality of these, and the importance I have to say of these men are like just laid bare.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that on some level, but I also think that it's kind of I think you messaged me this when you first watched it, like comments about like impotence, and I think that throughout that whole scene, there's a big part of it that's the rage that people feel throughout the whole movie, and the rage that they feel about being drafted into the situation, or in the one person's Chris's like, oh, I chose to be here, but now I'm upset that I'm here. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so that rage either is fueled purely throughout the entire movie, like with Bunny, his like psychopathic, like I'm ready to just kill any Vietnamese person I see. But then I think that it's important that right before that, like the Manny Washington character, is shown basically lynched. Like, it echoes like American lynchings when he's literally has like things, pushed into him. He's pushed up on a tree and they find him dead. Like a lot of the black characters in this movie are like, oh, well, we want the heads of whoever did this. Like they're like, everybody's kind of like amped up. They're following Barnes. And then when the moment comes when Barnes actually just shoots some woman in the head and there's no real reason behind it, everyone is horrified by that. You know what I mean? Like all of the black characters are the first ones to be like, well, we should frag him. And of course they don't, because
well, I think there like I thought there was like one black character that says let's do the whole like I'm maybe not sure.
No, they all agree. There's one character that's like supposed to be like a heroin addict that's like, oh, I think he was all right, and then they're like, dude, you're a heroin addict, shut the fuck up.
That's the Tony Todd character. That's Candyman.
Oh yeah, yes, yeah. Okay.
So but yeah, like, so I think it's kind of showing the sustained either rage or impotence of these characters, because everybody's kind of following Barnes into this village raid, and most of the characters have realized by the end of it that like this has gone too far, like this is horrifying. Like when Bunny beats the mentally challenged guy's head in, like obviously like Dr. Cox from Scrubs and
that's where the
John C. McGinley.
Oh,
it's transatlantic accent in this movie too. Like, oh, I'm a wise guy, eh? Like,
but he also can't hide the Dr. Cox accent. And at one point he like Kelso's name, like obviously Bob Kelso. It's Bob Kelso in Scrubs, like the guy that runs the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And in this, the other Barnes is named Bob. So he keeps saying like, all right, how you doing there, Bob? And I can't stop thinking, I get taken out of every
He calls him
that's
Chief
happening.
Rooney at one point.
Yeah.
He says, can I get on that chopper there, Chief Rooney? I'm like, what movie are you in? Is this a 40s gangster flick that you're trying to do?
But that's the kind of shit that Dr. Cox said too.
It's something though that's like I do find like very real about this though, and like we had touched on it earlier, but like like that is the person, right? The Chief
Erica,
Rooney,
how did you not
who
find
just
this
like
movie funny, by the way?
Oh my god!
In between me bawling my fucking eyes out, I just disassociated. So I don't know. Can't tell you.
I disassociated from the actual movie every time I saw the guy that played Dr. Cox later on saying Bob and Chief Rooney and all that stuff. It just pulled me right out. And
I don't know. I wasn't ready. I was not ready for how fucking sad I was going to be watching this stupid fucking movie, and like I just didn't recover from there.
No, I get that.
I thought it was going to be a fun time, and then as soon as I realized it was not going to be a fun time, I just started stress eating tortilla chips. And
what part of movie night extravaganza sounds fun? Okay.
Movie
Whoa
night.
there. Whoa.
Yeah.
The other thing that kept bringing me out of it was that every time someone died, the guy would go, "Medic!" And obviously it's Starship Troopers. Every time someone gets fucked up in Starship Troopers, they stop and they're like, "Medic!" So like I kept thinking about that.
Yeah.
Also, guys who are like been blown to like into 1,000 pieces, and they're like, medic. I'm like, no, he's
Yeah.
dead, man. You don't need to.
Yeah.
He's very
Yeah.
dead. You don't have
Yeah,
to.
like
do
well,
that.
like even like when you talk like the dude that like hit the signal the booby trap, and like he gets blown up, and it's like arms are fucking gone,
Yep.
fate, like you just all types of bloody, and it's like which like that's the thing too is that like what's kind of wild is it's and I think maybe goes into why the Vietnam War, like was able to be like shown like, hey, this is fucking bad. And is because the technology, like fast forward to, the Afghanistan war, something that's been able to go on for 20 years. The technology that, not only allows us to, get more of them than they get us, right?
Mhm.
That fucking bullshit metric, but also too of just like the life-saving fucking procedures of like simply just like putting on a fucking tourniquet. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
just
Getting the
as simple
Blackhawk
as that.
in.
Yeah, or like the ability to like get people out and into some type of like medical attention, and so like that is like literally part of the reason why. Yeah, like the forever wars can be sustained for decades.
When I
is
got blown
because-
up,
yeah,
when I got
there's-
blown up, I was medevaced out to Kandahar. It was in the shit like fucking 25 miles north of Kandahar in the Arghandab district. I got blown up, and I got flown back to Kandahar Air Force Base. And I had a team of doctors from every fucking country in the ISAF, in the fucking NATO, basically, work on me for my boo-boo that I had on my leg. And within 2 hours of me getting blown up, my friend dying, I was watching the German army play floor hockey on the boardwalk while I was eating Burger King in Huey Lewis in the News t-shirt and shorts.
You're so fucking cool, dude.
Yeah, it is so dude. Yeah.
No, none of this is cool. That's not the message.
I think I want to join the military now.
Where's Bartholomew?
It's really the Huey Lewis shirt that did it for me.
Yeah, that's you get to every military service and blowing up gets you a free Huey Lewis in the News.
Bart was wounded too.
If you get blown up twice, you get a set of steak knives. 3 times, you get a Cadillac.
There was a particularly aggressive Taliban goose that took down my friend Bart here.
So before we kind of wind down and I go to like final thoughts, I wanted to play this really quickly. This is Tom Berenger, who played Barnes, talking about Charlie Sheen and like a very weird moment that he had with Charlie Sheen. And I thought that this would lighten the mood a little bit, like very briefly.
Where'd you shoot Platoon?
Philippines.
What a movie.
Oh, Charlie Sheen. Yes, he and I were standing there waiting for a lighting setup, and he was looking at the Filipino crew, and he goes, "You see those guys looking at me?" I went, "Yeah. Why are they staring at you?" He goes, "You know what? Well, I was here when I was a little kid. My dad did Apocalypse, and I think those guys were in the crew." I went, "Yeah, that must be it." I said, "My dad was here too." He goes, "What movie was he in?" I went, "Charlie, it was the real war." What? I said, "Liberation of the Philippines" with MacArthur.
That's funny.
I thought that was a funny connecting thread between Apocalypse Now and Platoon.
I totally did never put it together until now. Martin Sheen Apocalypse Now, Charlie Sheen in Platoon. I never put it together until just now.
And kind of, I mean, I think that the entirety of Platoon is kind of in conversation with Apocalypse Now, because the Charlie Sheen dialogue kind of mirrors the Martin Sheen dialogue. And even they're in that helicopter and they're going above the Cambodian border, and there's that water buffalo that runs by. The same kind of water buffalo that Coppola. So the story of Apocalypse
chopped its head off.
Yeah, and that's a real that's a real thing that actually happened. Like every chop you see in that fucking water, like Coppola had gone full Kurtz by the end of Apocalypse Now, which kind of becomes the point of Apocalypse Now.
Him and Brando.
Yeah,
they both lost their fucking minds. They were doing peyote and fucking losing their shit during.
And they were in the same. I mean, they were. This movie was shot in the Philippines. Apocalypse Now was shot in the Philippines. Both times it was the Marcos government, who's an incredibly fucking dictatorial right-wing government.
Yeah, when like the thing that's like when he says, "Yeah, my dad was here for the liberation of the Philippines," it was just like,
yeah,
how is it that you make that movie and just go out? Oh yeah, liberation of the Philippines.
Yeah, well, I think he's talking about World War II and the whatever happened there in the words of the run. No, but so he's talking about
Yeah,
that.
from the
I don't think he's talking about like the actual like when the US came in and literally just ripped the Filipinos apart. I think he's talking about World War II in that, if I'm not mistaken. But still, like no, it does. I mean, it is a complete lack of of
And
context.
he also played Barnes, so
Yeah.
So it's he's still in character.
Barnes wasn't even written in the script. He actually doesn't. It's just they put Tom Berenger into the Philippines. They're like, do what you do, buddy.
No, Tom was just there. He was just
went
there.
full method and killed like 5 people.
Yeah.
But all right, so I'm gonna go around and do final thoughts because I'm trying to keep these down to an hour and a half. And every single time I've done it lately, I've gone to like 2.5 hours, and I'm like, fuck. So starting with Marcus, final thoughts on this and kind of the state of anti-war filmmaking in general, and like what could really be changed.
So I want to flip it, and I'll go with like talking about anti-war movies, which like I don't think like I said, it's like I don't think you can center, especially the United States military, in any type of and anything and expect to get something that's actually like anti-war, because what you're going to end up doing is showing some type of tough guy spectacle to a bunch of children that really have no context or way to fucking deal with it, and they're going to end up glorifying it. Any of these movies, like we've talked about, Platoon, Apocalypse Now, it's just not going to be able to happen.
Which Apocalypse Now, I'd say, isn't. I mean, as Karthik kind of pulled up an article for it, I think isn't an anti-war movie. I don't think it's even really necessarily an anti-Vietnam movie. It's Coppola going insane in the Philippines.
Which I mean, so I think like at the like really it really wouldn't like it doesn't matter. In no way, if you're going to center American forces, you're going to end up just glorifying this shit. In the same way of like, is Judas and the Black Messiah like a revolutionary fucking film? It's about the fucking snitch. Like, let's get real.
Don't get us started on that.
All right, sorry.
That argument almost turned violent because we had I watched it with we did on Give Them an Argument. We had like Ben on one side and Jason on the other side, like just going at it. I was like, we should record you guys' thoughts at the end of watching this movie, because we did like a patron exclusive movie watching, and I was like, we should record you guys' thoughts. So is this a revolutionary movie? And like Jason was like, no, it's actually a terrible movie. And
well, hey, Jason Miles is one of my good friends. So we talk about a lot of shit.
I mean, look,
there we go. This is revolution. But like, that's the thing, though, is it's like, what do people actually get out of any of this stuff? And it's just, if it is entertainment, then no, it is not anti whatever you're trying to do, or like revolutionary in any way.
And he had a comment about specifically Judas and the Black Messiah that stuck with me, where he was saying, what does this movie really make you want to do at the end of it? Like, what, like if you're watching this movie, so asking kind of the same question about Platoon.
Yeah.
I mean, what does this movie really make you want to do? Not much of anything, to be honest. Like
for me, it makes me just want to watch Major League, because that's a movie with Charlie Sheen and Tom Berenger that's worth watching time and time again, about the good old fucking Cleveland Indians fucking getting one over on the Yankees. And that's what, like, honestly, what you like, I'm happy you asked. Like, honestly, I was just like, man, I wish I would have watched Major League instead.
All right, so Dick Warlock, the same kind of question. Final thoughts, and just about anti-war filmmaking in general.
I mean, I'll agree with Marcus. We talked about this quite a bit. in the past, but like I don't think it's really possible to make an anti-war movie for a couple of reasons. Like the first and foremost being like war is inherently exciting. And if you're fucking bored and looking to like have some excitement in your life or to make a name for yourself or to you have something to prove or something, then
or if you're
that
tired
will,
of going to college and you're getting all zeros and
yes,
you want to
yes,
hang out
yes.
with the poors for a little bit,
It will be inherently appealing to you. Like I half joke that like half the reason I joined the military was because I watched Black Hawk Down too many times. You know what I mean? Like movies like this are like affecting in that way because you know, you just ask the question, what does Platoon make you want to do when you're done watching it? I think what Oliver Stone's message is, and based on that interview you just played, is that the war, you should better manage the war. You should have Westmoreland wasn't smart enough. There wasn't enough media coverage of the Tropic Lightning up in the 25th Infantry Division. And there should have been more Sergeant Elias's and less Sergeant Barnes. And if you had all those things, maybe the great thing that is America wouldn't have lost the thing that is Vietnam.
Yeah.
And it's like obviously dumb. It's wrong.
And I, you know, we got a lot of hate for this, I guess. I'm gonna plug This Is Revolution again. But I host movie streams now on This Is Revolution once a month, and the first movie that we did was Oliver Stone's JFK, and
very good movie, very good movie.
It is a very good movie. But Pascal and I had a conversation at the beginning of it because it's one of his favorite movies, kind of about like liberal conspiracy theory and how far the imagination of someone like Oliver Stone can really go.
Mhm.
And Oliver Stone's imagination in that movie seems to be that everything would be different if. Like there's a clip that I played at the beginning where he's talking about how, you know, if JFK had just stayed alive, like we wouldn't have stayed in Vietnam, which there's no proof that that's the case. I mean, it did seem like he wanted to get out of Vietnam, but like that doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, he's like, oh, there would have been 8 years of JFK and then 8 years of RFK. And, you know, then maybe like, you know, Ted Kennedy would have gotten involved and we'd be in a completely different place. And it seems the same with this idea, like, oh, well, we were fighting each other when we should have been fighting them. Like, I don't think that's the message that you should really be taking out of this.
Bro,
and I don't think that's a.
You have no idea what dangerous territory you're treading on to bring up JFK with me right now.
Well, I'll say those like
3 hours.
Switching from
No,
JFK.
I would like to cut this 3 hours short.
If Obama was assassinated early on in his first term, the stories would have gone on that he would have gotten out of Guantanamo Bay.
Gitmo.
He would have gotten out of the wars. He would have given everyone universal health care.
Obama.
And then we would have gotten stuck with. We would have gotten stuck with President Biden.
And then we got
what kind of
Joe Biden,
what kind of universe?
First term, baby.
But I also think that there's kind of a legendary story that doesn't. So I've been thinking a lot lately about JFK because I did the JFK. Well, no, I was on a JFK conspiracy binge. I went through a breakup, and you know, as you do, you go through like a pretty bad breakup, and you go down like a JFK conspiracy rabbit hole for a few months.
Yeah, that's a universal.
Guy Bannister. He shared the office with Lee Harvey Oswald.
All right. Hey, my only take on this movie is I was not ready to be that sad. So.
All right. Well,
we're not doing JFK discourse again. God damn it.
I kind of blame Lorax for this because originally he was supposed to pass the message along to everybody on Left Flank Vets that I wanted to do a crossover episode and we were going to talk about anti-war filmmaking. And then at the last minute, like not only did he cancel because he's in Japan, like he also didn't pass the message.
They them.
Well, all right. They didn't pass the message on to, you know, everybody else because I had Lorax on to talk about Paths of Glory and we had a really amazing, like, which was a 3-hour conversation with him and Gene Bajlan about Paths of Glory. So I think that, you know, I'll throw the blame to them that, you know, they didn't pass the message that this was supposed to be like a heavy episode.
Well, I'm sure it won't happen again. But actually, I'm curious, Erica. What's your take on anti-war movies? Right, that's the final thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree to a pretty decent extent that an anti-war movie that focuses on anti-recruitment is still, it's just really not possible from like the point of view of someone coming home from war, because we still live in a country that glorifies you, and you know, you still, like, I get 10% off at Applebee's. How are you supposed to persuade me to not do that shit again? I can't help that.
Maybe next Oliver Stone will just take a rocket launcher and blow up an Applebee's.
I think that it would be what a more beneficial angle, of course, would be the victims of imperialism being centered instead, because the United States, like media, filmmaking, and everything, ignores that. Like they'll ignore the other people, so it's like a dehumanizing them. So if you really care about like that, one way to combat it would definitely be to literally rehumanize the people that are being murdered, because that's what we've done. Like you were saying in the movie, there's like a lost in translation moment.
Which, by the way, his Johnny Depp is the translator, which it was weird seeing Johnny Depp not take center stage.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Well, and the whole thing is, it's a movie. It's sensationalized. I think that a much more beneficial anti-war movie would be from the point of view of that little girl that was getting dragged in the woods by the soldiers. I think that would be a lot more effective. Just in my opinion. But we're also surrounded by absolutely god-awful pro-war imperialism based movies. So a movie like this definitely stands out next to it, even though it's still not anti-war. So
And I do think that Oliver Stone, to defend Oliver Stone's style of filmmaking, he was trying to respond to, number one, I guess, John Wayne's Green Berets, which was the movie that kind of tried to get people to literally enlist in the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
But he was also trying to respond to, Deer Hunter, which he worked with the director of Deer Hunter. I forget the guy's name, but, they worked together a lot, and he actually helped out with this movie. But he kind of, there's this, he was trying to respond to a lot of, he was trying to respond to the anti-war movies that had come out before it, and
Erica,
how they
can you
weren't
mute?
really. Yeah, so he was trying to respond to.
What do I do?
There's a noise.
Oh,
There's
they're just.
Blame Ruth.
So he was trying to respond to the movies that had come out about Vietnam and kind of center his own story and explain why he thought that the Vietnam War was wrong, which I 100% agree with you that I think a more effective movie would be to focus on the girl that almost got gang raped in that scene. But I do empathize with the fact that he wanted to kind of put his own experience on the record. I just wish there were more movies, I think, that tell stories from a different angle than just Oliver Stone saying like, this is what happened to me and this is what happened to JFK.
Yeah. and I mean, like, that's those, like, I mean, like Eric says, like, and I think it would, and like Dick, like, I don't know if you mentioned off air a movie that
Come and See,
right? And it's actually like centered on someone who's living a life that's actually like soldiers are just coming and enacting war crimes.
I'm too scared to watch it. It's been described to me a few different times, and I'm too scared to watch it. It's exactly that. It's like a person who watches everything they love and everyone they know be murdered and raped and mutilated in front of them by the war, and they're just completely disempowered. Like, removing any empowerment from a war movie is probably the most accurate depiction of it, I would say. And that's the movie, and it's famous for it. And I can't watch it because I'm scared to, because I feel like
it does sound terrifying to make it the way through, which I think also hits on a major point within this anti-war filmmaking is, how do you get an American audience to really be affected by this? And I think the answer a lot of times is center the American soldier's experience, because we're so militarized within our society that, like, all of a sudden, like, you're seeing, like, you're watching a soldier get broken down, an American soldier, and you're like, oh fuck,
that's me.
Whereas
that's me.
Yeah.
Actually, a quick point about that too is that the Trial of the Chicago 7 movie.
Yeah.
At the end of that, Sorkin is a is a much more poor man's version of the fucking of Oliver Stone, you know. But like Sorkin didn't even know the fucking Chicago 7 were until someone asked him to write the goddamn movie.
Yeah.
But the end of the movie, the triumphant moment, is the Chicago 7 reading the names of fallen American soldiers in the trial, and the thing that is erased from the history via that movie, which will be the biggest depiction ever of these guys, is that they read the names of Vietnamese civilians that were also killed.
No, Tom Hayden did that too. I think that there's another thing that kind of connects a thread between those two movies, which is kind of keeping the radicalism or keeping the opposition between 2 points. Yeah. And in that movie, throughout it, like Hayden's opposition as like the head of the SDS is kind of, oh well, we could win elections one day, which I don't think would have been his thought at that time. Later in life, when he endorsed Bernie to try to move Hillary left, sure, but yeah. But those 2 points of media spectacle on TV, levitating the Pentagon or the process of winning elections being the two opposite points, obviously are ridiculous. In the same way, I think that having Elias and Barnes, which is one person goes, doesn't anybody follow the rules anymore? You can't just kill civilians. Doesn't anyone follow the rules? There's going to be a court martial, or having the other person be like, no, I'm going to go in there and kill as many civilians as I can because I think they're NVA is a poor rendition of the two, the 2 points on opposite sides. Yes. Karthik, final thoughts.
Yeah, I kind of don't know if this counts as a war film, as a depiction of war at all. But Ken Loach's "Wind That Shakes the Barley" comes to mind, as a sort of depiction of a movie that kind of becomes a gut wrenching depiction of war and conflict, and
very, very good. Agreed.
As a sort of way by which, I don't know, and again, it shows a revolutionary army's failure or betrayal and sabotage kind of taking place between brothers, and it's the older brother betrays the younger brother. I forget who's who, but brother betrays the brother and shoots him, and that's kind of a kind of good depiction of the absurdity of the whole thing. It's ultimately brothers killing brothers at the end of the day. Type of thing, and it's allegorized like that, and in a similar fashion, archetypes wise in Platoon, it's interesting that the Platoon is kind of the logical limit of how far the soldiers' humanity goes, because that's the only only thing they care about, is basically, and even within that, they kind of kill each other, etc. So even the humanity doesn't even go as big as the Platoon.
They were fighting. They were fighting amongst themselves. They could have been fighting the Viet Cong.
Right. and it's interesting how within these archetypes, you have Elias, who's the hippie progressive, and then you have Barnes, who's the fascist neocon type of person, kill or be killed character. And King, which is interestingly named, who's actually an Afro-pessimist character, who kind of is just focus on getting out of here alive in a very survivalist.
He is a
mode.
king.
And it's
Keith David is a fucking king. He's amazing in everything he's ever been in, and he's amazing in this.
I love that. I love the face that he makes and everything. That's I don't remember what it is that he always has that I'm gonna sell you something face where he gives that that huge smile, and I love in every movie that he does that.
When he yells "goodbye, motherfuckers" in the chopper as he leaves, oh my god, it's so good, so good.
I feel that was the high point of the movie. I think that it was kind of it almost was a celebratory moment when he was able to go away, and it was at least he made it out kind of moment. But nonetheless, I feel between these three characters, none of their politics actually rises to the level of doing really anything about the war, just merely saving their own skins or basically getting out of there alive, which kind of reflects, I feel the essence of capitalist society itself. And it's interesting that all of this, which now to give a shout out to left flank vets, I feel this is kind of coming back right back to your bottom line, that capitalism runs on blood and war is the biggest donor, because it feels it's basically the absurdity of the experience of like, fighting for somebody that you don't even know what the fuck you're fighting for, what the end is, other than to like get out of there. And that's what people do to each other when left in those circumstances. And I don't know if the experience of watching it is going to like, make somebody feel like I'm not gonna, like Dick said, I don't know if somebody who watches this movie even now is gonna go like, I want to be like Barnes or something. But I feel like that, especially watching in the present day, I couldn't come away from this movie with any kind of glorification of the war, whether it's Vietnam or just any war in general. I feel like,
yeah, and I think that's the point that Oliver Stone's kind of trying to get you to come away with, which is like, it's so far gone at this point that like, you come away with a pessimistic feeling from the movie. I don't necessarily think that that's enough, but I do think that is the point that he's trying to hit. And at the same time, though, it's interesting that JFK, as a comparative movie, I guess, kind of throws a lot of statistics at you. At the end, you know what I mean? Like halfway through it, they have the L. Fletcher Prouty character, Mr. X, like, giving you all these statistics about, how bad the casualties are in the Vietnam War. This movie doesn't take that tact. Obviously, this movie kind of shows you the Tet Offensive, which, the Vietnam War continued for a very long time after that. The Tet Offensive is really the moment that we realize, like, no, we might lose this war. But that the war peters on. This is not like they might be at the Cambodian border, but like, it's another year or two before Nixon starts, and Kissinger start literally bombing Cambodia and Laos. Like, and I do
to nuke them.
Yeah. And I do find it interesting that both Apocalypse Now and which I don't think is an anti-war movie by any stretch of the imagination, but that movie and this movie kind of used the Cambodian border as a sign that the war has gone too far, or that the story has gone too far. Like, they as soon as you go over the Cambodian border, it's like, no, like
a literal line was crossed.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's got to be the sequel. It can't be covered in this movie. Obviously. That's got to be the Killing Fields.
He made Born on the 4th of July, and you know what I mean. Like Oliver Stone did make 2 other Vietnam War movies pretty close to this. One movie that I want to do that I want to know if you guys will come back from is I keep forgetting the name of this movie.
Tropic Thunder. Yeah.
No, I would do Tropic Thunder as a. Do you want to do a Tropic Thunder stream in the near future?
Sure.
I think Erica needs it.
Yeah.
All right.
And somebody, and like as the representative for the black delegation, like Downey Jr. is fine. It's fine.
Let's do it. Sometime
as a white woman, hold on. Did you just say that it was okay?
Let's do, but sometime in October, let's do Tropic Thunder as a follow-up.
What was the other movie you were thinking of, though, Forrest? Now I'm curious, though.
I don't remember the name. Oliver Stone shot this movie in tandem with hold on. He shot this movie in tandem with a movie that I keep forgetting the name, but it's about Central America and like the Reagan military conflicts going on at the same time.
Oh.
And it's like a really famous movie, so I don't know why the name is escaping me, because I've been listening to Oliver Stone's things all day about Salvador. Salvador is the name of it. And
heard of it.
Oh well, so he shot this movie in tandem with Salvador, pretty much. Like he shot them back to back, and it famously has James Woods running in at the end of it and yelling. It famously has James Woods running in and yelling, "You guys are the same! You guys are the same!" Which Alex Cox, who's the filmmaker that made a bunch of movies that we've watched in a row on this podcast, said his example of liberal filmmaking as opposed to leftist filmmaking is Salvador, because when James Woods runs out and goes, "You guys are the same! You guys are the same!" Like that's kind of the liberal spirit.
Also, famous chud James Woods too.
Yeah.
Like Oliver Stone directing the guy's famous chud.
Before he was a chud. I mean, this is 1986. But
there was no Twitter. He might have been then. We just didn't know.
Yeah.
Probably was a big Reagan fan. But anyway, so Left Flank Vets, how can we find it? How can we listen to it? Plug it. Anybody that wants to.
Hit the like and subscribe at Left Flank Vets.
Follow us on Twitter at Left Flank Vets. We are the greatest posters and only correct.
You really are the greatest posters. Like, I feel like I retweet stuff from you guys more
Yeah.
than
You
anybody
deserve
else.
better than us. Don't do that. And then you can also catch us on Twitch. We stream almost every day.
Twitch.tv/LeftLinkVets.
Yep, pretty much just if you look up Left Link Vets, if you want to have a good chuckle, you can Google our and you will see us come up in like right-wing writing sometimes.
Oh, and sub to our
people
YouTube. We're
being
almost at
pissed
1K.
off. Oh yeah, then
We're
our
almost at
YouTube-
monetization for the YouTube. Give me. I have bills to pay. Okay.
Yeah, are you guys really gonna let my 2-year-old son suffer out of your selfishness? You have to subscribe to our YouTube, or else you hate children. It's really
Pretty
fucked
sus.
up.
All right,
It's so true.
plugging my own thing on Thursday. We're going to be talking to Natalie Scher about Naked Gun 2.5, The Smell of Fear, and probably talking in depth about OJ and why it's hilarious that 3 months after the third Naked Gun came out, the OJ murder happened. So they had to have still been on a press tour, and it has to still have been in theaters when that all went down, which is fucking hilarious. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there and just say left is best.